Okay. Good morning, everybody. Joining us for the first webinar in the US Trail Running Conference webinar series for 2022. Welcome everybody from across the United States, and I think we've also got a few international attendees as well, participants too. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Terry Chiplin. I'm the event director for the US Trail Running Conference and this webinar series. And welcome to, I'm actually right now. Oh, sure, we don't need the screen share yet. So right now I'm calling in from joining you from the lands belonging to the Arapaho and Ute peoples in which we now know as Colorado, Estes Park in Colorado. So welcome to all of you from wherever you are in the world. I just want to introduce, big thank you to our friends at Marathon Printing, who, as a result of their support, is making the webinar series possible, and we've been able to set access as free for everybody for this webinar series. And for those of you that don't know, Marathon Printing is a family-owned company that specializes in producing custom printed items for endurance sports. And race bibs are their most popular item, either custom printed or stock bibs. And Marathon Printing also supplies vital accessories for race directors like pins, bags, and pennant flags, as well as postcards, business cards, brochures, bumper stickers, and labels. And they've been a loyal supporter of the conference since 2015 and are also an event standard partner for our colleagues at the American Trail Running Association. And so we're very grateful to Ryan Zirk and the team at Marathon Printing for their support of this webinar series. So we have actually four guest speakers, two live here. So Shelley, you give us a wave from Northern California, and Claire Lafave from Vermont. And Robert Sherburne is our good morning, Sher, is our backup guy who's in snowy Texas right now. But we also have joining us. I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint slide now. So give me just a second. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that okay. Good, we're getting thumbs up. Yeah, as I said, big thanks to Marathon Printing, and we wouldn't be able to do this webinar series without them. So today's webinar is all about how to analyze and produce carbon neutral races. And our session sponsor for this session is Native, a public benefit corporation, and Claire is actually a client manager for Native, and so we're going to be introducing Claire, and she's going to have a chance to share some information about carbon offsets in a short while. So this is what we're going to be running through today. A little bit of housekeeping, then feel free to use the chat function, and you can use that anytime during the webinar. There is a question function as well, and so the Q&A. So we'll be feel free to put your questions through on there as well, and we'll actually get to a Q&A time at the end. So Shelley is going to introduce really the situation regarding greenhouse gas emissions and trail running endurance sports. And then we're going to share a video with Porter Bratten from Orca Running and Ben Rist from Orca Running, and they'll be talking about how they've moved to produce carbon neutral races this year, 2022. And then Claire Lafave is going to be talking about carbon offsets and what Native can do to help. And then I'm going to be talking about what the work I've done in terms of analysis and producing a carbon negative conference in 2021. So, and then follow on with Q&A. So Shelley, if you could unmute and welcome to the webinar, and just let me know whenever you're ready to move slides. And yeah, we're really honored to have you here from the Council for Responsible Sport.
Thanks so much, Terry. I'm really happy to be here and joining you all virtually from my place on the planet here in Northern California on the unceded territories of the Mukilteo people. And it's a beautiful sunny day. And I'm excited to talk to you all about the sort of inevitability of traveling to and from events and how that's also really the biggest climate impact from staging and hosting participatory events. So we've done some study, and if you can just go to the next slide, Terry, we'll jump right in. So at the Council for Responsible Sport, events come to us to verify their actions and against a set of standards that were created by sustainability and sport professionals. And so we call those the Responsible Sport Standards. And part of the requirements of getting certified is to report greenhouse gas emissions from event operations as well as travel. And so we had a good amount of data, and this last year we finally got around to analyzing that data and find, learning some things about the average impact of an event. And so what we found, based on data from 29 participatory events between 2014 and 2019, was that 98.5% of the greenhouse gas emissions from hosting an event, these were all road races. So whether they were in urban centers or on trails, they were road races. So the vast majority, as you see, of impact comes from the people's travel to and from the event, wherever they may be coming from. And everything else, fuel and generators, the waste that is generated, the purchases of any merch and swag, electricity for rented spaces, and even food and concessions elements are all just 1.5%. So it's a very, there's, what we're learning from this is that as an organizer and as race directors, you all have pretty limited ability to rein in the direct operational greenhouse gases in terms of how that will impact the overall footprint, right? Because people need to travel to get to your event. So that's the reality. And then the question becomes, what do we do about it? So next slide. If we want to make a dent, if we want to, actually, let's go, yeah, here we go. Thanks. So the general idea here would be to measure and then mitigate and then manage. So the trope in sustainability talk is that you can't manage what you don't measure. And so we do recommend and have some tools that help you measure the carbon footprint of your events. But I think this study that we did can really help kind of accelerate that and give us some good working averages that'll help you feel confident about moving forward with whatever mitigation and offsetting that you choose to pursue. So mitigate first, really just understanding that travel is the big impact here, thinking about, maybe trying to grow the regional and local participation to reduce the travel miles. I know some events really focus on having that destination race experience, and that's their business model, that's fine. But just that is one way, is to reduce the travel miles generally. So, and along with that, once people do get to the nearest urban center, how can you, as a race director or organizer, help them get out to the trail in fewer vehicles? So getting people in the same cars and shuttles. And then just, being wise about your course locations. And so there's lots of reasons and variables that weigh into those decisions, I know, but keeping them closer to urban centers and maybe even nearer where people are mostly coming from. If you have 70% local participation, just thinking about the distance people have to travel to get out to the trail that day. All right, Terry. So the key action here that is essentially, there's a couple ways that it could be done, but how do you start to take accountability for that unavoidable travel impact and the fuel that is burned to get people to your event, is really just to invite them to consider purchasing an offset. it's not an ideal solution, but it's the solution that we have right now that addresses the climate impacts that we are making, and starts to try to compensate or balance for them. And so we ran the numbers, and on average, a participant was generating about a fifth of a ton of carbon for each race that they attended. And if you were to purchase a $20 per ton offset, and I'll invite Claire to speak more to the quality and price of offsets. But there's a wide range. But so at a median price, which would be around $20 per ton, it's under $4. So asking folks if they, at the point of registration, if they would like to make that contribution, and you make it easy for them, it's more likely that they would take that action. And then you, as a race director, can help tell that story and build up the normalization of that practice, right? That accounts for those impacts to the planet. So a call to action within the registration flow is recommended. The other option, the faster option, would just be to raise the price of your registration by $3.80 and incorporate that cost directly, but I know that's not realistic for everyone. So so just offering the invitation is also recommended. And then sharing information about why it's important to you as a race director and event leader, and how, and maybe even encouraging or thanking and recognizing the people who do choose to do that just helps kind of with peer recognition and getting people to start to take up that practice. So I'll be happy to chime in on questions later in the conversation, but thanks so much, Terry, for inviting me on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shelley. And just a shout out, I went through the certification process with the Council for Responsible Sport back in 2018 for the US Trail Running Conference. And
Terry, you went on mute.
That was interesting. Sorry. Okay. And it was a really, a really life-changing and business-changing experience for me, going through that process. And I think it's fair to say that if I hadn't done that, then I wouldn't be in the position now that I am, thinking about, carbon offsets and greenhouse gas emissions for the conference, and also for races as well. So thank you, Shelley, for getting me through that process. And it was as I said, a great life-changing opportunity. So before we get on to the next slide, coming soon, rescore. Oh yes. Yeah. So do you want to mention quickly about that, Shelley? I know you kind of touched on it.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. It's a little bit premature, everyone. We're making an announcement later this month, but I'll work with Terry to make sure that you all see when it is accessible to you. We have a new tool. It's an Ondemand application that allows you to measure yourself against the same responsible sports standards that Terry just mentioned. And groups can choose to self-assess or pursue certification. That's up to you, but the tool allows you to do either or both. So getting the guidance and having it all in one place is a new development that we'll make sure you hear more about.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. So Peter has got a question, which I'll just mention here. Is it known which of the registration software providers have functionality for participants to purchase offsets at time of sign up? I believe Ultra Sign Up said on a past webinar they were working on it. Peter, in answer to that, then yes, Ultra Sign Up, we know are still working on that. So it's not a live option yet, but there are options that you have as a using a registration provider, which I'll actually touch on. Actually, Porter and Ben will touch on it during their session, during their recording, but also I can touch on it during the information that I share about what I've done with the US Trail Running Conference too. So Peter, thank you so much. That's a great question. And I have here a Protect Our Winters has Mike Foot. Protect Our Winters has a good calculator tool for this. Will be cool to see it incorporated into registration platforms as an option. So thank you, Mike, for that. I just wanted to launch a poll here quickly. If you don't mind jumping on this, then it'll be great to get your feedback. How many of you have been impacted in some way by climate change? over the last year. If you could add your response to that poll, that would be fantastic. Thank you. And we'll run another poll before the end as well. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for a second, and I'm going to bring up next. I'm going to bring up the recording. So excuse me. So Ben, Porter and Ben, unfortunately, Porter's on holiday this week. He's in Mexico right now. I wanted to give him an option to be a part of this webinar. So I pre-recorded a session, which is going to last about 16 minutes. And so I'll press this now. I'll press play now, and then Shelley, can you and Sherb, can you see this okay on the screen share? Great, thank you. Okay, all right, so here we go. So yeah, we'll sit back and listen. Gentlemen, I wonder if we could start with just doing a short introduction for each of you. And Porter, if you want to start with you, and then Ben second.
Sure, yeah.
Terry, can you, the audio is muted.
Timing. So right now I'm also in product management on the tech side of things with Racemaster.
Cool, thank you so much. So gentlemen, really appreciate you making the time to get this recording set up. And Porter, I know you're going to be away on vacation when the webinar happens. So thank you so much for making this possible. The reason I invited you to come in on this recording is that Orca Running have made the decision that you're going carbon neutral for 2022. For your races. So first question for you is, what was it that prompted you to decide to go that route, Porter?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of reasons, but there's probably two really big ones. The first and the biggest is that I just think that it is the right thing to do. I think that, you know, we want the Earth year-round for our children. I have 3 of them, so I want them to have a Earth to live on. I think every company, individual, needs to think about their carbon footprint and take steps to reduce it or bring it down to 0. The second and smaller reason, I think, is that it can be a marketing angle. If somebody sees that a business is carbon neutral or offsetting their carbon footprint to some degree, that might be a reason for them to sign up for your race instead of another race.
Cool, thank you so much. So you have 14 races this year lined up. So
we have 24 races.
Oh, 24 races. Sorry, did I miss that evergreen? Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, 24 races. So have there been any major challenges with looking to go carbon neutral on that scale?
Yeah, going carbon neutral is not very easy. The process of even measuring your carbon footprint is not terribly straightforward. I actually got a quote for an outside company to do an audit, and it was $5,000, which is not, in our budget to do that. So we're kind of doing it in-house. I think I should make it clear that for this first year, we are primarily bringing our carbon footprint down to 0 through the means of offsets. The ideal is that each company, any company, brings their carbon footprint down as low as possible by eliminating carbon emissions in the first place, and then offsetting whatever is remaining. For us, we are a small company and learning how to do this, so we are relying primarily on offsets. So I think with that said, the major burden for us is going to be measuring the carbon footprint for every race and just getting an actually accurate number that's not super under or super over what is the actual emissions. And in the end, it will be an estimate. There is no way to know exactly, what it will be. Everything will be estimates on layers of estimates. But as long as we can make an educated and backed up guess estimate as much as possible, that's what we're shooting for. So I guess that answers your question is, yes, it's tricky, but if you're good with spreadsheets and like numbers and digging into things, it's not that hard.
Cool, thank you. And yeah, I love your points about the estimation piece, and I think that might be something that with a lot of race directors that are listening in, they're kind of wondering, how the hell do we do this? So next question is, how easy has it been to analyze your carbon emissions or footprint for each race? And Ben, I think you're going to jump in on this one.
Yeah, so it's I wouldn't call it easy, but there are portions of it that are straightforward. There are some portions that are less so. And to Porter's point, I think if you can try to measure and gain insights about races on an ongoing basis, whereas when we started this project, we wanted to take an exemplary year in the past, which 2020 was anything but exemplary. So going all the way back to 2019 and using all those numbers to analyze and try to get that data from proved to be a little harder, I think, than it would be had we just started with going forward. Sorry if you hear my dog in the background there. So some things that made it a little more difficult, a lot of the calculators you see online to calculate your event footprint, that's all geared towards conferences, conferences, different conventions, things like that. So you sort of have to pick and choose which portions of those calculators make sense. But really the biggest portion for any event is going to be the participant travel, and that's where Porter was right about, if you're good with spreadsheets, good with numbers, because really with with registration data you can at least get a good estimate of as the crow flies, distance travel of all your participants to the events, and then use that to really boil down a number that makes sense for you to offset. Because aside from really trying to promote carpooling, the participant travel is one of the things you're never going to get down to zero, and one of those things you'll have to offset.
Yeah, no, Ben, that's a really good point. I mean, and to Porter's comment as well, that it's not so much about we with the kind of sport we have, that there inevitably going to be, we want people to come to our races, and so there is going to be some travel involved, and then as Porter said, and you just mentioned, carpooling is one way to help them reduce the emissions, reduce the footprint. Okay, thank you. So what platform or platforms have you used, Ben, to help in this process in terms of helping you go through your emissions and footprint?
So obviously, like I said, leaning on past registration data. So the platform that Orca and Evergreen happen to use is RunSignup. So using exporting past registration data from there to compile all that and then manipulate it within Excel. Obviously, Excel, Google Sheets, any sort of spreadsheet platform is going to be your friend in this endeavor. We also, a big portion of our efforts here was a survey that we sent out to past participants to try to get at least an estimate of openness to carpooling or current carpooling habits, try to propose ideas and see what might sort of move the needle with participants to encourage them to carpool. So for surveys like that, obviously Google Forms is an easy one. but really in any sort of survey platforms or anything that we have access to. Beyond that, it was, you know, like I mentioned, you pick and choose what parts of different online event calculators that you want to use. There were a couple in particular, including the one that BP puts out, that were helpful on our end. And yeah, just pairing with that registration data, some readily available sort of databases online, like coordinates of that correspond to certain zip codes. Downloading that, very helpful in terms of getting that as the crow flies distance.
Gotcha. And what was the response like in terms of the survey? So yeah, what was the response like on that?
Yeah, I mean the response rate, like the pure number of responses, wasn't that great. But like I said, we were going back to 2019 participants for this particular effort. But the responses we did get were very helpful, especially with open-ended questions that we asked about carpooling. So yeah, not a great response rate, but quality of responses with our audience, I felt was good.
Very good, very good. Are you guys okay, by the way, if I share the data or the link back to your website, so that people can actually take a look, because you have some information there in terms of the breakdown of footprint, and I was surprised that that your participant travel you worked out was 80 cents on average per runner.
Yeah, I mean that number can change a little bit because the rate for carbon offsets changes. It's a market product, but that's a ballpark number.
Yeah. Cool. Good. So how did you decide, talking about offsets, how did you decide on the offset program that you ended up working with?
Yeah, so carbon offsets is a huge field and one that I'm not qualified in. So ultimately, I had a friend who worked for Nature Conservancy. So I talked to him and got his recommendations since he is qualified. He's the director of sustainability. And he pointed me towards a company called South Pole, which is based in Geneva, that has offices all around the world. And I got in contact with them and was able to purchase our offsets for 2022. So what we actually did is we purchased in advance, in bulk, our offsets for participant travel all of 2022. The idea being that if you buy in bulk, you save money as with everything else. And the other idea is that rates are going up and will continue to go up. So it saves money to buy it now. And then what we are doing to pay for that is that we've added on a carbon offset surcharge for registration prices.
Yeah.
And so everybody's paying. It's not optional. It's less than $1, so not much to balk at. And so we'll get the money gradually back over the course of the year to pay for that. But South Pole is good to work with, and they gave me a lot of information about the particular project that we are funding, which is a wind turbine project in North Dakota. And it is important when you select a project that it is a reputable one, because there is a wide variety of, from very sketchy to the very good. There are some people out there who are saying basically like, you see that tree over there? See that tree? I was going to cut it down, but you gave me some money, so I'm not going to cut it down. And I have no idea if that's true or how many times that tree has been sold, essentially. So the best thing is to go through a third party like South Pole to find a certified project where you can actually find that information. You can see what project you're funding.
Yeah, cool. And we'll include on the live webinar, we'll include information on South Pole there too. So people can take a look at that. Yeah, thank you so much. Are there any other factors, just to wind up here, are there any other factors that race directors should be aware of when deciding to go carbon neutral? And I know you've mentioned several here already, but is there anything else that we haven't touched on?
I mean, there are many things that go into a race that affect your carbon footprint. And the two big things is that you have to decide what you're going to consider, where you're going to draw the line. It would be very difficult to calculate the carbon footprint of a metal made in the factory in China because there's not a lot of data that you'll get. But you could probably figure out how much carbon was used to transport that from China to here, whether it was by ocean or by sea, or by air. There are other things like, do you have beef in your post-race food? Because beef generates a lot more methane than other things. And so you can really go down the rabbit hole. And I think it's best to just, the single largest thing is for sure going to be your participant transportation. And that is probably on the order of a little more easy to calculate. So it's best to start with that, the single largest thing, work on that, and then go from there. And don't try and do it all at once because it's kind of overwhelming. And if you've got deep pockets, maybe you can pay somebody to do it for you. But it's the time to do it is now, don't wait.
Yeah. I mean, one thought that comes to mind, just to finish up, is that if we've got race directors out there who are not necessarily comfortable with spreadsheets and that kind of thing, then maybe check out with your volunteer group or somebody close to the community that would be comfortable with that and would maybe help and volunteer for you in terms of doing work. Yeah,
and there are people whose job this is their job, so. Reaching out to your runner community to see if anybody that would be willing to donate their time and expertise, probably a good idea.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and you're I don't know if you are the first, but you're one of the first race series that I've seen that have made the decision to go carbon neutral. So kudos to you for taking that step, and I think it's an important one, as you said. It's like if we don't have children ourselves, we all have friends or family that do have children. So like we've got to think of their future as well. So thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now, and okay, great. So lots of really useful information there, and thank you so much to Porter and Ben for allowing me to pre-record that so we could include this in the webinar as well. And so Shannon had a question there. Oh, Shannon had a question there about eliminating single-use plastic for bulk water, and so some great responses there. So thank you, Brian and Kelsey Banaszynski. Oh, nice to see you on the webinar too. And reached out to the company to order in bulk to get a better price too. So excellent, thank you. Great feedback on that. And Claire, we're going to be over to you now. So I'm going to share my screen here. I'll get back to the PowerPoint, and then I will include this. Sorry, Claire, before you jump in, I will include the slide deck. I'm going to send this out with a recording from the webinar tomorrow. So there's also some information here from the Orca website as well, so that will be part of the slide deck that I send out to you guys. So so we'll hand over to Claire now, and Claire, thank you so much for being here on this webinar, joining us, and I'll touch on what I did in terms of working with you for working out the emissions for the conference last year. But thank you so much for making this possible with the webinar and having Native as the session sponsor. So I'll hand over to you.
All right, thanks, Terry. Hi, everyone. I'm Claire. I work at Native, and we are a small independent carbon offset project developer based in Burlington, Vermont. So what that means is basically we're looking for project types and folks that are wanting to make a climate intervention but don't have the funding to do so, and then going in and doing the due diligence and quantifying the impact and getting that carbon financing to those actors, and then getting the projects validated and verified by third parties, and then supporting companies and individuals along on that journey to help make that new action happen. So go to the next slide. So I know we've been talking a lot about carbon neutral, carbon offsets, but just to level set, make sure it's clear for everyone. What exactly is a carbon offset? So one carbon offset is equal to 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, meaning carbon dioxide or an equivalent amount of another greenhouse gas that has either been removed from the atmosphere, either through a technology or in living biomass like trees or soil, or that has been avoided, meaning that that ton of carbon would have been produced or emitted if not for this particular intervention, this particular project. So generally, individuals, companies, events are making an estimate of the emissions associated with their activity, and then they are looking for projects to purchase an equivalent number of tons, or maybe more, which Terry will talk about, to balance out that footprint. And as we've said, like balancing out is not, is not the only thing you should be doing. Finding ways to reduce is really important as well. But there are still going to be those residual emissions, especially associated with travel. And finding a carbon offset project you're excited to support is a great way to manage those. So when you're supporting carbon offset projects, you can support all different kinds of project activities. A few examples here: you could help support ranchers to adopt improved rotational grazing practices that give the grass more time to rest and recover and store carbon in the soil. You could help to pay for a permanent conservation easement on a native grassland that the owner of that grassland was facing a lot of financial pressure to transfer or transition into a cropping system to grow corn and soybeans, which requires tilling up the soil, which releases all that carbon that's been stored into the atmosphere over time. Or you could help highly subsidize the cost of a really simple biodigester for small scale livestock producers. In this third picture, this is in Mexico, where these small scale farmers have livestock, they're producing manure that produces methane, and these biodigesters capture that methane and then turn it into a source of fuel that farmers can use in their homes. And that also helps to improve water quality and air quality in that region. So I think what's really cool about some of these projects is, as trail runners who really care about the natural world and being able to protect it, you can both support climate action and support protection of nature at the same time. But they're all different kinds of projects out there. So next slide. So we've been talking a lot about the different tools that are out there to help you estimate your footprint. We have two on our website. You can find a ton of online free web calculators. We have one for businesses and one for individuals, and they help you estimate travel, including car, plane, public transit, as well as emissions from household or facility energy consumption and event attendance. The business calculator is really similar. It just also allows you to enter shipment data to calculate emissions from freighting goods. And both tools will allow you to enter data in multiple ways depending on what you have available, whether that's just sort of an estimate of this is all of the miles that we're expecting participants to travel, or if you want to put in each specific trip. And I think Shelley just shared a really great resource for being able to calculate a bunch of trips at once in the chat. So that's a great tool to have in your toolbox as well. Then we also have a custom calculation process. So, if you're doing a more complex calculation and need more flexibility, if the online calculators just aren't working for you, or you're uncomfortable with spreadsheets like we were just talking about, you can reach out to me and my team for extra support. And as a free service, we can help you capture and track the relevant data and then plug those numbers into our internal calculator to help you estimate that total footprint. But neither our web calculator nor our internal calculator cover full life cycle assessments of products, such as material, the embedded emissions in materials, or the manufacturing associated with them. So that's important to know. But as we've talked about, that's probably going to be a really small percentage of your footprint for a race. But if you wanted to get a general estimate on that, you could use the Berkeley Cool Climate Calculator. This is, berkeley.edu website, similar to ours, but then you can also enter in how much you spent on a purchased good or service, and it will estimate the associated emissions embedded. So here, for example, you could put in how much you spent on how many cotton t-shirts, and it would give you a very rough estimate of that footprint. And then, there are a bunch of other tools out there too, and we recommend that you experiment and figure out what works well for you. So I'll end there, but happy to answer any questions about project types or measurement at the end. Thanks, everyone. Okay,
wonderful. Claire, thank you so much. So what I'm going to do now is move on to what I did in terms of looking at the analyzing and looking at the greenhouse gas emissions for the 2021 US Trail Running Conference. So this is a graphic that our friend Ali Mack produced for us. And so as a result of the estimate, and as I think each of us has touched on, that it is an estimation, that there is no way to get an exact figure in terms of working out what emissions are when you have so many moving parts in there. What it included was so it's 7.14 tons CO2 equivalent, and what that included was volunteer and staff transportation to, from, and at the conference. And so that equaled 3.94 tons, and that was 55% of total emissions. And then apparel, production, and shipping. So that estimate was 3.14 tons, which is obviously a big chunk as well, because we didn't actually have, we don't have huge numbers. We actually had 100 shirts and something like 200 hats. Then power usage at the location. So this was how much power was actually used at the location we held the conference. And then the waste produced. So how much waste we actually produced from the conference as well. And then just some guidelines here. I mean, the first thing is to actually plan ahead. So because I'd gone through the certification with Shelley and the Council for Responsible Sport, then I already had some background knowledge about what was required in terms of the data that I would need to actually do the analysis. And so what I did was this was in Fayetteville in Arkansas, and we were at the town center. And so I asked them to actually take a power reading. So they literally read their electricity meter before the conference started and when the conference ended. And so I could actually get a real time and actually accurate power usage. And then the other thing I did was that there was an organization called Food Loops, who they were processing everything that we produced. So, and then they were splitting it up into recycle items, composting items, and waste items. And so we actually had, as a result of the data they produced after the conference, then we had a really accurate estimation for how much waste. And then what I did was using Claire and several emails at one point for working out different carbon calculators. So Native actually provided the estimates for apparel production, and the power usage, as I said, I just asked ahead. Oops. And the waste was managed by Food Loops, so I had a complete data post-event, and then the estimate for emissions on that waste was again provided by Native. So really important to plan ahead. And so the total estimated emissions were 7.14 tons, as I said. And one of the things I thought of approaching this was carbon neutral is a great first step that I think we should be aiming towards. but I'm also aware of the fact that, you know, we've been, as a sport, we've been effectively, not just as a sport, but as society as well, we've been drawing down from the future for years now. And so, you know, while carbon neutral is an important priority, I decided to actually take it a step further and pay forward to the future. And so the offset I purchased was greater than the estimated emissions, excuse me, the conference created. So I actually added in a 40% buffer, if you like. So, so instead of 7.14 tons, I actually purchased 10 tons of CO2 equivalent. So that then made the operational aspect of the conference carbon negative. So I was literally offsetting more than the emissions we created by estimation. And I also estimated all the participant travel for the 2021 conference. And that worked out to $4 per participant. Now, there is going to be some variation depending on how far people travel. So it was interesting that, Shelley, with your data, that you came up with $3.80. So I'm guessing a lot of those events were drawing from people who are traveling a long distance. Whereas with Porter, then he's working out 80 cents. You know, so he's drawing a lot from local people that don't travel so far. So yeah, I worked it out to $4 per participant. I decided to include for 2022 registration a $5 registration fee, which would then offset effectively, or hopefully I'll know after 2022 conference, offset the participant travel. So my goal for 2022 is, with the combination of the analysis of the administrative side, the operational side in terms of emissions, that we've yeah, we can add in. So I'm aiming to be fully operationally and participant travel carbon negative. Yeah. So Peter, so anyone else feeling like we've all been going disproportionately focused on going cupless? Well, I think that's a really important piece, and you know, it's a great question, Peter. I think, you know, we have been missing the bigger picture to some extent. But I think it's also really important to go through this analysis. So, so just to let you guys know that once I had all the data to hand, it literally took me one afternoon working solo and not doing anything else to just focus on this and work through it, work some spreadsheets. And really, if you do plan ahead, then, you know, there's every reason why you should be able to. It's depending on the size of the event, but even if you have a large event, you know, with say 1,000+ runners, for example, that you have, you know, the spreadsheet, for example, from looking at last year's race, then you probably have a spreadsheet with all the zip codes for the runners that took part. You know the zip code for where the race takes place. And so you can use, for example, the calculator that Shelley shared in the chat, and you can plug that in bulk and get a really quick estimation in terms of the offset that you would need to purchase for that. So it's, yeah, I mean, it was really interesting for me once going through this process. And I think it's something that it's not rocket science. You know, I'm not a wizard with spreadsheets, but I can plug in some figures and put you know, put a calculator in and then come up with a number. And then, you know, Claire and her team at Native have been fantastic with the support. So so I fully I know they're not the only offset provider out there, but I at least wanted to give you guys an option so that you know at least one person that or one organization that you can make contact with. So yeah, in terms of then, okay, what offset do I want to put my money into? So I decided through the options that Native proposed to me that it's called Medford Springs Grassland Conservation. As it says here on the screen, then grasslands are an important ecosystem and home to a rare diversity of plants and animals. And more than 70% of grasslands in the US have already been lost. so we've unfortunately, through a lot of the practices that we have, then we've lost a lot of the option to benefit from the grasslands that are out there. And so bringing early financing to organizations before they acquire land and easements, better equipping them to conserve remaining grasslands at a faster pace and on a larger scale. And so 6,900 acres have been acquired and conserved, and 96,000 tons of CO2 emissions prevented. And 150 plus years protecting endangered wildlife and local fauna. So yeah, grasslands store 1/3 of the Earth's carbon. And again, we kind of look at the bigger picture, and I think, with the sport that we have, then I've kind of gone through different phases over the last few years since becoming more engaged in the climate and working out what I can do to help. And one thing that's become really apparent to me is that we can each do something. For a while I kind of felt powerless, really. It's like, oh God, this is so overwhelming, and there's so much to do, and what difference can I make? Well, of course, if we all do something, then we can make a big difference together. And there's something, the last data I saw suggests that there's something like 9 million trail runners in the US, for example. So that's a big community we have. And if we can start to introduce and take steps to get the community engaged. And last year I was thinking about climate activists and kind of really excited about getting people engaged and active in it. But then I also realized that becoming an activist is not necessarily what some people want to do. It kind of being an activist maybe has some negative connotations. And so I've come across another term just recently, which is climate citizen. And so, as citizens, I think we can all, take responsibility and do our best individually to make and help our climate, because for sure it needs some healing. So Peter, in terms of registration software providers, then I'm actually using Ultra Sign Up for the trail running conference, and so what I did simply is just add $5 into the registration cost for the conference options for 2022, and then there's I've done similar thing to what Porter has done for Orca Running as well. So there's some information on the website which says, this is what as an organization we're doing in terms of offsetting our greenhouse gas emissions. But of course, the other thing we need to do is not just offset, but as Porter also touched on, and Claire and Shelley as well, that we also need to reduce our emissions as well. So I think it's kind of a two-pronged. So we need to have kind of both pieces of this operating at the same time. So yeah, I don't know if anybody else has any questions. And oops, yeah, thank you for your participation. So Peter, hopefully that answered that question for you. But I think from what I've seen from most registration providers, then you can add in an item for swag, for example. So you can add in something like you have an optional T-shirt, for example. So you can also add in something that has you can add in a greenhouse gas emissions offset. So you can add it in as based on your analysis, then whatever the cost is. I think most registration platforms have that kind of option, or as I have done, just include it, and as Porter has done with Orca Running and with Evergreen Running, then just include it in the registration cost. Yeah, please contact me if you have any questions. The next webinar in the series is February the 24th at the same time, and is on diversity and inclusion focused on BIPOC. And I'll stop the screen sharing now. I do want to, we've still got yeah, we've still got most people on still. So I do want to run another poll. So I'm going to, maybe we could have it in the chat. Yeah, sorry, I closed down the polls now. Yeah, if you could maybe put a comment in the chat. How many of you know fossil fuels on site? Yeah, absolutely, Peter, that's a great idea. I mean, fossil fuels is the problem. That's where the the root cause of all that we've been doing over all these years to the atmosphere. That's where it comes from. So. Yeah, I think battery-powered induction for cooking rather than propane and gas. So yes, definitely, and I think we all could do with moving towards that on a personal level within our homes as well. But if you wouldn't mind just adding something in the chat about having listened to this webinar and having had the information presented to you, do you feel like going carbon neutral is something that you can move towards now? And if you can just add a comment in the chat, that would be really helpful to see. Yeah, thank you everybody for your time, and really appreciate you being a part of this, and I hope we can as a sport move together towards being at least carbon neutral. That keeps us where we are. Going carbon negative gives us a chance to pay it forward and make some changes going forwards. Shelley, Claire, thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. So good to have you on, and thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Okay, great, Peter. Thank you so much. Yep, Revelands 100 in Maine. Peter, when are your races happening? How far have you got? How far have you got ahead before May? Okay, wonderful. Okay, so you have enough time, hopefully, in between now and then to maybe look at introducing some changes and including some information on this. But as I said, I'll be sharing the slide deck with you and the recording from today. So I'll be looking to do that for you guys tomorrow. So look out for that coming to you. Now, because the okay, Alison, thank you so much. That's a great comment. Yeah, I thought it was really important for I think we've done a really good job in terms of creating some excellent content, and I didn't want cost to be a barrier to entry for people. So thank you so much, and Alison and everybody, Peter, listening in. Then feel free, once the recording is out there, then feel free to share it with anybody and everybody as well. So I'm going to put the recording up on our YouTube channel for the US Trail Running Conference, and so it won't be a big download or anything like that to share, so everybody can access. Thank you, Brian, for your comments, and take care, everybody. Have a great weekend coming up, and I'll look for. Oh yes, Amy Kohler. Yes, yeah, Nancy. Thank you so much. Actually, Amy called me while we were partway through this webinar, so apologies if you had the call ringtone come through. Mandy, good to see you out there. Thank you. Yeah, Alison, focus shorter distance, first small step, reducing cup waste. Yeah, that's anything we're doing in terms of reducing waste helps reduce emissions as well. And Kelsey, thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, great stuff. Thank you so much, everybody. It's noon. Go get some food or a drink, and have a great run if you haven't had one today already. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the trail soon. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks,
Terry.
Terry.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Feel free to
care.
reach out with questions.
Yeah.
All right.